roll.
So, Eric, I'm so glad that we're able to get together because there's something I've been wanting to talk to you about. I have been checking out your chart here, and I wanted to have an opportunity to have you explain it to me because I know that there's a lot of information here, and I know that when I look at it I feel like there's a lot of inspired information here. So I was hoping that you could break it down for me in simple steps so that I could put it together on my own because I can't always reach out and touch you. So can you help me with that?
Sure. Well, up here under the cup, this is the top of the chart. Here, let me roll this out in case.
Okay.
See, the chart works in different pieces, you might say. There's the top gray section, and then there's this brightly colored striped section,
right.
And there's this pastel section, and then this is broken up to what I call the Mishkan pattern section, which these images here kind of describe that, and then there's these pictures, these little illustrations, and then this is its own thing, kind of the bottom line, Daniel 12:4.
Okay.
Actually, this is all of chapter 12 there, but specifically it goes to the phrase that says until the time of the end, which is Daniel 12:4, but I'll explain that in a minute. But if we go up here to the top, the very top row here is the English alphabet. So as a way to orient the Hebrew alphabet, the Greek is actually mentioned right underneath it. So what happened was this ancient Hebrew, I believe, was the oldest language, the oldest alphabet on the face of the earth.
Okay.
That was actually designed by Creator Yahuwah himself. So I don't consider that the Hebrew alphabet is a man-made or humanly generated idea. That the Creator Yod-He Vav-He spoke these Hebrew words to Adam and Hua back in the Garden of Eden, and then at the Tower of Babel, all the other languages morphed and changed and became the languages of the world, but that Hebrew would have retained its own characteristics and essence. So out of Hebrew, it became known as Phoenician, and then Greek, and then Latin and English and all the other languages of the world that we have. But these are specifically, you might say, the Semitic language group is specifically directly related to Hebrew. So the English letters, there's 26 letters in English and only 22 in Hebrew, and some of the letters don't follow through. Like there's no letter Zadi in English, but the sound of a TS or a Z or a TZ is the English equivalent. Some of the letters are out of order, a couple of them, but basically this is so you can, like I say, orient yourself or line up with the phonetic sounds of consonantal sounds as well as the ordinal placement of the letters. For example, ABC is pronounced as A, maybe a V and a G. Aleph, Bet, Gimel. And Bet can be pronounced as either B or V, very similar to Spanish. So to explain this whole chart, I'm going to do this one of these days. I just haven't gotten to it yet, but it might take like 30 or 40 hours to really explain the chart. So to just explain to you in like about 10 minutes here, a concise thing, is the English letters. These are the Greek letters, which line up to them. So this is alpha, beta, gamma, delta, epsilon. The interesting thing about Greek, the digamma is in the ancient Greek alphabet, but they dropped it. And the interesting thing that does is it sets up in the modern sense that the sixth letter, zeta, actually finds its meaning with the seventh letter, which is the zayin, which is our letter G. So that the shape of the Greek letter zeta, actually you can see our lowercase letter G there, you know, the two circles combined, which are actually a picture of a disc plowing instrument, which would otherwise look like that in the ancient Hebrew, which is two spikes that they would drag across the ground to create furrows. So the fact in Greek that the letters equal numbers, the same in Hebrew, where the numbers mean something and the letters mean something, you get this mix-up where the sixth letter has the seventh letter's meaning and the seventh letter has the eighth letter's meaning, and so there's this degree of confusion until you get to the letter even the 10th letter. When you get to 20 and 30, and it changes. But the letters 1 through 10, and then it goes 20 through 90, and then 100, 200, 300, 400.
Okay.
But what I'm saying is that the Greek letters, because they dropped that letter, it threw a wrench of confusion into even the orientation of the ordinal sequence of the letters. And the Greek letters mean something that people consider as kind of this mystical relationship. So those are mentioned down here. These letter shapes have been found on various ancient Hebrew scrolls that were written in the Paleo version, but there's many different Paleo fonts. So this is just showing some of the different descriptions. And then in the black line here, it says these are thematic logograms. In other words, each letter shape can be read, you know, the way you'd have a logo of a corporation where you just have this graphic symbol, and that it actually speaks for itself without saying any words. Each letter shape actually is like that. It's an emblem or a logo. The word gram comes from Greek, which is like where we get the word grammar, and it speaks of a letter or something written or something inscribed. So this line here is my font of the letter shapes. Hi. And this whole section here is a very unusual sort of reference in that it says here in this square, consider which each of these letters means to say. So the way this chart's lined up is that everything from the top to the bottom in this white column is concerning the letter A, or the aleph.
Oh, okay.
Everything in the blue column all the way down has to do with the letter bet, or B. Everything in the purple column is the gimel, or the C. Everything like in this purple column has to do with our letter Q, or the kuf.
Okay.
But each letter is a point of view. For example, if you were wearing different glasses, you might have some glasses that for reading and some for long distance. You might have telescopic or binocular or X-ray glasses or infrared. You know, you have different types of lenses that allow you to see things differently. So every letter is a way of seeing the world, or every letter is a type of point of view by which you can reference everything else that exists. So if you thought of like, if the alpha or the aleph or the letter A as the first letter, it says here strategy, and it says here omnipotent, eternal, outside, or other side of creation event, outside the material universe. So this is this perspective of the beyond, before time and space. So that means if you look in this first row across, that I've tried to take the concept of what every letter was designed to be before there was anything that came to be. So this is a bit subjective, but what it's saying is that the aleph itself is this notion that there was something before all this became. And then the bet is to say, for example, if there's one, if everything was just one, like before there was a two, before there was an other, everything is unified as a whole, what happens when suddenly there's two? There's an other, something becomes bifurcated or becomes divergent. The concept of there being an other when there's only one is completely novel. It's never been seen before. It's outrageous. If there's only a singularity in all that exists, and then suddenly one day there's a secondary, there's something else, and for eternity past there's never been that second thing, then it's this monumental event in, well, there's no time if it's all eternity, but you know what I'm saying? So this notion of there being otherness is what the letter bet is about. So that's what this is saying here. And then, so too with the gimel and the dalet and the hay, the aleph, or the strategy, the concept of the plan of what each letter is what that first row is. Now the letter bet literally means to exist in form. So if the aleph is this concept sort of reference, and the letter bet is object sort of reference, then from a perspective, like a lens, you could say, okay, then from a bet perspective, what is each letter? So this horizontal row is to say, if bet is a basic object, how would you interpret the letter aleph as a basic object? Well, the word aleph literally means ox. And it's drawn as a picture kind of like an ox head. So you could say aleph represented by a basic object is an ox. Gimel, or bet represented as a basic object, is actually a house. Gimel represented as a basic object is a camel. Dalet, a door, hay, window. And in this row here, this second row across here, got the phone ringing. This doesn't what you get when you're out in public instead of being on stage where you've got like the...
Just continue. It's going to quit. Quitting right now. Dang. Hers rang first, so...
Well, it's okay. See, if we were on stage, this wouldn't happen.
No.
But you know, when we're keeping it real, you have all sorts of stuff happening.
There you go.
Anyway, so Gimel is the letter with a foot, or it speaks of being a verb or some kind of an action. So what's each letter as an action? So I have written down here, Aleph is having to do with between, or the preference for a relationship. In other words, if Aleph was just this concept of unity or oneness, and all of a sudden this Aleph wanted to extend itself, why is it extending itself? What is the, as a concept, as a motive, what's it doing? It's wanting to project itself from being static and independent to suddenly being involved.
Right.
Which again, if everything in the eternity past was a singularity, it can't be involved with anything but itself, and so all of a sudden it designs, once upon a time, so one day it just gets this idea, the it of the infinite one gets this idea to have something other than itself, less than itself, a diminishment, because only it is its full. So this Gimel is some other nature which is independent of, separated from its Alephness. So this concept of a neck, so you have a head and a body connected by a neck. The word nexus is this connection, like you'd have a rear end of a car, and then you'd have the transmission connected by this differential, this drive train, this drive shaft, and that which, it acts as this nexus which connects. Well, the Gimel is drawn as a letter like the head and neck of a camel, or you might even picture like a giraffe, and as the throat of the neck is a conduit, so it's that which connects the mouth to the stomach, you know, the head to the body, and so these concepts are embedded within the shapes of the letters. But I've tried to show in this part of the chart how each one of these letters can be seen from each one of these letters' points of view.
Everything's connected.
So some people have looked at this chart saying, well, if there's two letters in a word, for example, if there's the letter resh next to the letter mem, say, how do you connect these? Well, I have these letters and these letters on this side, just make it a little easier. So if you say, well, here's the resh column and mem, you know, is in red, that makes it easy. And I have virtuous and chaste, which is to say pure and clean. Well, what does resh and mem have to do with virtuous and chaste? Well, I'm not suggesting that the definition of the word spelled resh mem is virtuous and chaste, or the word spelled mem resh. So you could look at the resh here and the mem here and say, well, that's a production system. Well, part of the 40-hour explanation is to go through every one of these spaces and give you my reasoning behind it. But what I'm trying to say is...
We have a link to that on the channel too. I'll link it to this video. Okay.
The notion, though, that this is not a definition of the word resh. For example, resh mem is the word rom, where you get Rome and Romulan, which is something really great and really wonderful, which is really good. Well, to be virtuous and chaste in the using as a hierarchy of evaluation that righteousness is the epitome, then to be virtuous and chaste is a benefit. Of course, if you're in the world of pirates and bad guys, to be virtuous and chaste is on the bottom of the... So it's always a reference as to say compared to what. So this is all compared to the standards and the heart of the Creator who gave us this alphabet by which to reference as the ultimate tape measure, the ultimate plumb line to reference true verticality. You know, you have to hold a plumb line from somewhere and have it hanging down so you can see whether the wall is plumb and level, you know. So he gave us, I believe, this. Is that raindrops?
Yep, it's starting.
We should roll this up. Well, anyway, the next section down in the, let me put this on the table here. The next section, which was in the pastel colors, is a little bit different.
Yep. We're at 15 minutes.
These are, I tried to exaggerate, it's the black and white here, I tried to exaggerate the modern letter shapes. They're kind of distorted looking because I wanted to show the extremes of how to draw them. Some of the letter shapes you'll find printed in books are so monoform, you might say, that it's hard to tell one letter from different from the other. For example, the cough is rounded like a backwards version of our English letter C, whereas the bet has a flat bottom and it may or may not have a dot in the middle of it. The Dalet has a very obvious bump out the back side, you might say, and I tried to tilt it sort of, kind of, and the letter Gimel has a foot, and sometimes the letter Gimel looks like the letter Nun and you can't tell the difference. So again, these are a little distorted looking intentionally to exaggerate the idiosyncrasies of the modern shapes of the letters. But this pastel section is a little bit more abstract in that it's telling you Aleph is a concept, Bet is a noun, Gimel a verb, Dalet a preposition or a position of one thing compared to another. It's getting rained on here. But also it says who, and this is the word me, which means in Hebrew who, with a question mark, saying I believe that these letters, Aleph through Tav, are the identity of the Mashiach, the Messiah. In other words, if you didn't know what the alphabet was for other than just a string of random letters, why should there be these 22 letters? And if they're derived from ancient Hebrew culture or just human, gotta roll this up again, it's raining, then you could say, well, they don't necessarily mean anything, they're just there. But the idea of saying, is there a Messiah? Do the Jews have a correct notion of the Messiah, or is the Christian Christ, or the Greek Kyrios, or go to the Oriental, the African? I mean, does each continent have the right to determine who should be the ultimate Messiah figure? Well, I believe that these 22 Hebrew letters were given us from the Almighty Himself as self-disclosure. Therefore, it's His Messiah that He sent through Israel, specifically through the tribe of Yehuda, and that these 22 letters actually tell us who the Messiah is by describing His role, His character, His nature, and significant occasions in His life as He appeared walking amongst us in human manifestation. Now, I try to be very particular about my phrasing. There's a distinction between, in fact, there's been a controversy for 2,000 years. Is the Messiah the creator that we ought to worship in the flesh? I was talking to a fellow the other day who said, Jesus Christ is the Father. Problem with that is that that's been a problem for 2,000 years, and many people have killed each other with hideous wars regarding the discussion and the philosophical distinction between whether He is God or represents deity, or whether He's speaking to the Father as a separate person, or whether He is the Father in the flesh. I believe that the answer is in this alphabet. Of course, if I tried to give you a simple answer right now, it would probably be more confusing. But I'm saying these letters identify the truth of the matter. And if He gave us these letters as a communication, I don't worship the communication. I believe these letters identify who the Creator is and what His message is. And when He sent a communication, this is the communication. And that communication to become human, but then whether we worship the communication versus worshiping the communicator is the whole different matter. But all these things are addressed on the chart, and we'll have to continue with another occasion.
All right.
I hope that helps.
That does. That helps a lot. Thank you.
To be continued.